Hi, thanks for joining us today. My name is Molly Gazenhouse. I am the lead Educational Opportunity Center counselor at Kentucky InnoWorks College Access Center.
And I am Lindsay Driscoll, and I am the financial aid director at Jefferson Community and Technical College.
Thank you for joining us today to discuss FAFSA Filing 101. Today, we'll be providing an overview of the FAFSA, Free Application for Federal Student Aid. We will be discussing what you need to complete the application, where you go to complete the application, when to complete. We'll discuss some tools that are used on the FAFSA, the IRS data retrieval tool. We'll discuss important parent information. We'll also discuss the difference between a dependent student and an independent student in the eyes of the FAFSA. We'll be talking about what the FAFSA does, some next steps, and some common mistakes. So starting off with what is needed for the FAFSA, you're going to need your Social Security number. If you're a dependent student, you'll need your parents' Social Security numbers. If you are not a U.S. citizen, you're going to need your alien registration number from either your I-94 or green card. You're going to want to have access to your federal income tax returns, both for you and your spouse if you're a married individual, or again, if you're a dependent student, you will need yours and your parents' tax information. Most information that is asked on the FAFSA comes from the 1040 page of your taxes. You'll also need to gather untaxed income information if you receive child support, any veteran benefits that you might receive. And then again, if your parents receive any of that, you will also need it for your parents if you're a dependent student. If you make enough money, they'll also be asking questions about cash checkings and saving accounts information. Here we're providing an overview of 2019 federal income tax information. So you can see here, this is the first page of the 1040 U.S. income tax return. Also an example of a W-2 tax form. This W-2 tax form does come into play when your parents are married and file jointly. You'll want to be able to have a look at both their W-2s when completing the FAFSA. Also, for another visual, we have a permanent resident card, as well as an example of a Social Security card. Again, providing these examples just because being as prepared as possible before you start the FAFSA with this information allows for fewer mistakes and being able to go off directly what are on each of these items. Another thing that is great to start the FAFSA is having an FSA ID. An FSA ID is a fancy username and password combination that allows you to not only sign the FAFSA electronically, but also gives you access to all federal student aid information at studentaid.gov. An individual that would need to make this, obviously, is the student. Furthermore, if you're a dependent student, you would want your parents to create one, at least one parent. Items needed to create that FSA ID are a Social Security number, and a unique mobile phone number or unique email address that can be associated to that username and password. Places to complete the FAFSA. So again, the FAFSA is a free application for federal student aid. You don't want to go to FAFSA.com, but you would like to go to FAFSA.gov to complete the application. The application can also be completed mobilely via mobile app and is available in both English and Spanish. So you need to complete the FAFSA for each year that you're attending school. Right now, we're discussing the 2021-2022 FAFSA. That application opened October of last year, and 2019 taxes are considered. As you can see here, for each year that you're attending school, it would be between July 1st to June 30th, and then it looks at prior year's tax information. So again, the 2021-2022 school year looks at 2019 taxes, and that would be for a student attending school anytime between July 1st of 2021 to June 30th of 2022. As a reminder, it is an application that has to be renewed. You want to renew every October. It opens October 1st every year.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the IRS data retrieval tool. This is a really helpful tool that will allow students and parents to connect their tax return already submitted to the IRS and to have that pertinent data automatically uploaded to their FAFSA. This helpful tool prevents you from having to dig out old copies of tax returns and manually place that information on the specific lines of the FAFSA. The data retrieval tool connects with the FAFSA to gather the information needed. It is also helpful if later additional tax-related information is needed from your school's financial aid office. Less documentation may be requested from the student and family who use the tool since the information is already verified by the IRS. There are certain tax filers, though, that are unable to access the IRS data retrieval tool, and those categories are outlined on this slide. They include students who did not mark that the FAFSA for the 2019 tax return is completed, if they have a marriage date that is later than January 2019, that's for dependent students, or for the students if they have a marriage date that is later than that. If there is a social security number that begins with 666, this includes taxpayers from the freely associated states, the Republic of Palau, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, or the Federated States of Micronesia, or as well taxpayers who file a Puerto Rican tax return. If the tax return filed is a non-U.S. tax return, if the tax return was submitted as married head of household, or if two married people filed separate returns, or if neither married parent, in the case of dependent students, entered a valid social security number, or if a non-married parent or both married parents entered zeros for a social security number. Dependent students must enter parental information. We will discuss on an upcoming slide the questions the FAFSA asks to determine if you are a dependent or an independent student. If you are a dependent student and need to report parental information, this information on this slide is very helpful. You should be reporting your legal parents, which are biological or adoptive parents or parents awarded by the state. These types of parents would be the ones listed on a student's birth certificate. If parents are not married but living together, you would enter both parents' information. If your legal parent is widowed and never remarried, you would enter that, or has never been married at all, you would just enter that one parent's information. If your parents are divorced or separated, you would put the information of the parent you live with most during the year. If that parent is remarried, you would also put the information related to your step-parent who lives with you in your household. And you will also want to pay attention to the date set up on this slide, as it is how you would enter this on the FAFSA. This slide contains more information regarding who is not considered a parent. We know all families are different, but for the purposes of the FAFSA, these individuals, even if you live with them, cannot be added to the FAFSA in the parent section. They are widowed step-parent, grandparents, foster parents, legal guardian, older siblings, aunts and uncles. The only way these types of individuals are considered a parent for FAFSA purposes is if you have been legally adopted by these individuals. This slide outlines the questions the FAFSA will ask to determine if you are considered an independent or dependent student. For the 21-22 FAFSA, the questions are: were you born before January 1st, 1998? As of today, are you married? You would also answer yes to this if you are separated but not yet divorced. At the beginning of the 21-22 school year, will you be working on a master's or doctorate program? Are you currently serving on active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces for purposes other than training? Are you a veteran of the U.S. Armed Forces? Do you now have, or will you have, children who will receive more than half of their support from you between July 1, 2021 and June 30th, 2022? Or in other words, during the award year? Do you have dependents other than your children or spouse who live with you and who receive more than half of their support from you now and through June 30th, 2022? At any time since you turned age 13, were both your parents deceased? Were you in foster care, or were you a dependent or ward of the court? Has it been determined by a court in your legal state of residence that you are an emancipated minor, or has someone other than a parent or step-parent obtained legal guardianship of you? And just to keep in mind, emancipated minor is not anything that is recognized in the state of Kentucky. So if you're from the state of Kentucky, that might be an issue that would not be something you'd answer yes to. At any time on or after July 1st, 2021, were you determined to be an accompanied youth who was homeless or were self-supporting and at risk of being homeless as determined by your high school or district homeless liaison, a director of an emergency shelter, transitional housing program, or the director of a runaway or homeless youth center? These questions, if you answer yes to any of these questions and it's not pretty cut and dry, there may be additional information that is requested. So just keep that in mind and carefully think through when answering yes to any of these questions. All the information collected on the FAFSA is used to determine a student's EFC, or expected family contribution. This number is used by the Financial Aid Office to determine each student's eligibility for federal grants and loans. It can also be used to determine state aid eligibility and institutional scholarships. As was mentioned in previous slides, sometimes additional information may need to be collected in order to complete the FAFSA processing. So keep an eye out on communications from your school's financial aid office. This slide includes some steps that will or may occur once the FAFSA is submitted. You will receive an email to the email address used on the FAFSA. You'll receive something called a student aid report. And this will document your EFC, and it will give you details about what that EFC means. It is always a good idea to keep your student aid report or SAR on file for reference. Watch out for other communications from the college and their student financial aid office. Additional information may need to be collected. Typically, that is requested for students who need to complete a process called verification. FAFSA verification is a process implemented by the Department of Education to ensure the accuracy of information reported on FAFSA. Typically, about a third of students are selected for this process, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have done anything wrong. It's just a means of allowing Department of Education to kind of audit the information on the FAFSA. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact the school you are planning on attending. Once the FAFSA is complete, the financial aid office at your school will be responsible for finishing up the process, collecting additional documentation if needed, and awarding your financial aid. This slide includes a list of common mistakes students make regarding their FAFSA. The most common mistake, maybe it's not the most common mistake, but a very important mistake that people make is not filing at all. By not filing, you may miss out on federal, state, and or institutional funds. Some of these things are available even without financial need. As Molly mentioned in a previous slide, FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid and should be submitted at FAFSA.gov. A telltale sign that you are on the wrong site is if you're being asked to pay money to file the FAFSA. Filing the FAFSA is 100% free. You should attempt to file your FAFSA every year as soon as possible once it becomes available on October 1st. There are forms of aid that are limited and given on a first-come, first-served basis. That is why it's so important to complete your FAFSA as soon as you can. Plus, it will ensure your aid is awarded in plenty of time before the school year begins. Since additional documentation could be needed, early filing gives both the student and the school plenty of time to ensure everything is settled before your bill is due. The FSA ID is crucial to finishing your FAFSA. You should get it before you start the process, and be sure to use both your and your parents' FSA ID to sign. If you do not use this to sign, your FAFSA will be rejected and unable to be further processed. The FAFSA question should be read carefully and accurate information included. I've seen people misread and enter the wrong numbers for income, which knock the student out of grant eligibility. If you leave required information off the FAFSA, this will slow the process down. The Financial Aid Office is responsible for ensuring all the information is collected, and if it is not, it may cause a delay in the awarding of your financial aid. And that is all we have for our FAFSA 101 presentation. We thank you for listening to this presentation, and we wish you luck as you pursue your educational goals.